Welcome to a special edition of Steve's Vintage Model Builds. And today we've got a live chat, and we're going to have a bit of a rant, a bit of a nerd out, and I hope everybody has fun. Excuse me. So, before we start with anything, I'm going to start with a bit of a rant. You can call it a wine fest or a self-pity party, whatever you want to call it. If you've been so kind to join us, Mrs. O or Stephanie, maybe go make a pot of tea or something for the next 5 or 10 minutes, because this will be guy talk for a few minutes. Okay, guys. I'm going to talk about women for a bit, in general, and more specifically, my wife. As opposed to females, I'm talking about when women, spelled W-O-M-E-N, turn into women, spelled W-I-M-M-I-N apostrophe. Now, I love my wife, and last fall we celebrated 20 years of mostly blissful matrimony. Now, I think all you guys know what I'm talking about. How when you're a bachelor or newlywed, you're very happy to see a woman's frillies hanging in your bathroom. But after a while, as do we, it gets old after a while. And eventually just becomes one of those little irritants one puts up with when married. I guess that's what's called maturity. Anyway, about women, W-I-M-M-I-N apostrophe. I went out to do some errands one day last week, and when I came back, to my horror, I found my wife had emptied the closet in the hobby room and was going through all the stuff I'd stored there. With a big smile, she proudly said, "See, I'm organizing it for you." Now, I've nothing to hide, but it took all my 20 years of experience, patience, and discipline in marriage to not lose my temper and launch myself at her with violent intent. Instead, I said nothing and turned around, left the room in order to compose myself. But I couldn't ignore it and stay away for long. Well, just as women, W-O-M-E-N, can communicate with stony silence, so can men. So, facing the very real threat of my thunderous silence, she did what anyone does when threatened. She attacked. She was upset that I was upset, and couldn't understand why I would be upset. Incredible. So out I went again, for the same reason as before. When she'd almost finished her desecration, she called me to show me what she'd done, and was so happy to show me how she had taken the carton with all my empty completed kit boxes and added the other empty boxes I'd been saving for whatever. God, no, 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 I cried. Those are for that, and those are for that. They're supposed to be separate. She looks up and says, "Well, how am I supposed to know?" And I'm like, "You're not supposed to know, because it's my stuff." Anyways, rolling my eyes as my blood pressure rose to stratospheric levels, I simply said, "I had it all organized." And she says in a huff, "Well, I'm finished now, so I'll put it all back," as if that made it okay. Still not understanding why I was so put out, she continued with her defensiveness. I said I'd never mess with her sewing area, so why was it okay to mess with my stuff? And she replied, "I didn't touch anything. I just rearranged it." Now, this statement was so patently absurd that all I could do was laugh. I repeated it, as if to myself, out loud, twice, and laughed again each time. Now, she was in a huff because she thought I was laughing at her, which I was. And I brought it to her attention how absolutely silly and absurd that statement was. So, finally she got it. She understood. She apologized. We kissed and we made up. But geez, guys, I mean, come on. I don't ask for a lot. I'm sure you don't either, but anyways, so that's my little story, and I think probably some of you guys can relate to it. But anyways, there's been no murder. I didn't have to make bail. Everything's fine now. Excuse me. Okay, so we got the final reveal today on the SR-71 Blackbird, and we're gonna have a little talk on that in the tradition of the our British modeling buddies will remember these in the vein of a good old radio talk when they used to have experts come on and they'd be asked questions and answer questions and give a little talk on various different subjects, some of them quite complex, scientific and so forth. That was before experts were basically guns for hire to manipulate data to come to the result that whoever hired them wanted. Anyways, we used to have them here in Canada, and I miss them. But anyways, so here's the first thing. I've been going on about this for a little while, and it's only partly done, as you can see. So the 176 88mm gun and tractor kit, the Airfix Vintage Classic. I nabbed a little campsite set off of the interweb from Amazon, and so anyways, this is going to be the diorama. It's going to be the little campsite. Got the nice little palm trees. Like palm trees? Don't they look nice? Gonna have to paint those up, but still, they look pretty good, I think. And oops, this guy maybe he had a little too much beer. Okay, so yeah, so we've got the guy sitting around the campfire. I painted and decorated this, painted the soldiers up, and blah 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 blah. Anyways, it might be a little different configuration when the time comes around, but there it is. And I'm going to have a lot of fun finishing it up. And you'll see the final result when it's ready. Excuse me. And the next thing, here we go. I haven't got this decaled yet, but this was the AEC Matador and 5.5-inch gun. There we go. Painted up the figure inside, and this one went together much more nicely than the Bren gun kit did. And yes, I know I put the artillery piece together wrong. I managed to fix it, but still, it wasn't a very good kit. This one went together much better. Okay, so yeah, there's the underside, the rust weathering and all different stuff. Hope you can see that. Pretty pleased with that. Again, with the gun, this one went together much better than the other, and the instructions were more clear. Same problem with the bouncing around with the numbers on the sprues. That's the way it is, that's the way it was, and that's the way it ever shall be, I suppose. At least with these kits. So yeah, so that was nice. So now on to the start of the show, the star of the show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start, go.
You like how I did that? Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way, move this up. So here she is. My completed SR-71 Blackbird. And going to do an after build review on this too. Got her all decaled up. I'm pretty happy with it. Actually, I'm very happy with it. And very pleased. We saw the cockpit before. I haven't put the canopies on yet. They're going to be up because I'm so pleased with the cockpit there. There, that's a good picture of it. There, nice view there. Get some light on it. And so, yeah, got the astronauts too. I'm not sure if I'm going to use those, not the astronauts, the pilots, or pilot and reconnaissance officer. And so we got her all decaled up. And here's the underside detail. And for the first time, I finally got up the courage to use the Wada airbrush and Neo air compressor that I got just before Christmas time. And like I said to Peter Oxley in an email, oh baby, where have you been all my life? Ha! Anyways, works like a dream. I was really pleased. I started off with this. This is the D-21 drone that comes with the set. We'll talk about a little bit more about that later. I haven't painted the top part here, but just for practice, I used the airbrush to paint the underside. Went pretty good. A couple spots here. But overall, worked like a dream. Really nice. And I call this one Baby Vader. Okay, Peter? Baby Vader. Alright. And so, in the kit, you had the option of putting it onto a cart, which I haven't quite completed yet. Or you could mount it on the top here. I didn't want to do that for two reasons. One, you know, it's kind of takes away from the main model itself. And the other reason was the D-21 drone never flew off the SR-71. And a bit of an after-build review. This was a monogram kit, still marketed as a Revel-Monogram kit. And this, we'll go into this more, but the Blackbird went together quite nicely. Not much flash. Everything was pretty good. This one, however, there were some fit problems. Had a lot of extra flash. So I'm thinking that Revell added this after the actual monogram kit. I don't know about that, but anyways. So yeah, so there's Baby Vader, and he's going to get completed. And so yeah, so this is it. You see I put the skunk logo there for the Skunk Works, and you know, detailed the interior, all that kind of stuff. And in the tail, did the ceramics in the tail there. And so yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. Very pleased with that, as a matter of fact. All right, so for the main presentation here, gonna get a pointer. Excuse me. Viewers of the channel know I love history, and always happy to talk about it. So I'm gonna give a double dose of it today. During the last video with live chat, Peter Oxley was saying, I mentioned that this was going to be coming up. And Peter Oxley was saying, yeah, he wanted to know more about Kelly Johnson, the famous Kelly Johnson, who was responsible for so many incredible aircraft designs. So here we go. Also nicknamed Habu, the SR-71 Blackbird, or Habu, which is a type of pit viper snake native to Japan. Design began in 1958, and the first flight was in 1964, and it entered service in 1966. I guess you're seeing my reflection there. You don't want that, do you? I'll move this back so that... There we go. Get that out of the way. Okay. And so again, yeah. Welcome back, Mrs. O. If you vacated, and if you didn't, hope you had a laugh. Anyways, so of Swedish descent, Johnson grew up in the state of Michigan. He was born in a very remote town in northern Michigan. His father was a construction manager. And he was just 13 years old when he won a prize for his first aircraft design. He called it the Merlin Battle Plane, after Merlin the Magician. And of course, this was before, as far as I know, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine ever made any kind of appearance anywhere. And while attending grade school, which is called primary school in the UK, he was ridiculed for his name, Clarence. He was born Clarence Johnson. And the boys teased him mercilessly, calling him Clara. And one morning, while waiting in line to get into class, one boy started with the usual Clara routine and, messing around with him. And fed up, Johnson tripped him up so hard he broke the other boy's leg. The boys then decided that he was not a Clara, after all, and started calling him Kelly. The nickname came from a popular song at the time. Has anybody seen Kelly? Kelly from the Emerald Isle. Others might know it as From the Isle of Man, but that's the iteration that they were using. And in the song, Kelly was he was a fighting Irishman, so that's how he got the name Kelly. And while completing his master's degree at the University of Michigan, Johnson conducted wind tunnel tests on Lockheed's proposed Model 10 airliner. He found the aircraft did not have adequate directional stability, but his professor felt it did, and told Lockheed so, and the project went ahead as it had been designed. He completed his master's degree at the height of the Depression in 1933, and joined Lockheed as a tool designer on a salary of $83 a month, which is about $1,900 US in today's dollars. I guess probably about, maybe 1,500 pounds, something like that. Sure, not a lot, but, 1933, glad to have any kind of job that fed you. Shortly after starting, Johnson convinced Hal Hibbard, the chief engineer at Lockheed, that the Model 10, still in the design phase, was unstable. Now, it's obvious Hibbard saw a very talented young engineer in Johnson, and somebody must have had his eye on him because, you know, he felt he could walk up to the chief engineer and say what he had to say, which was never one of Kelly Johnson's failings. He was a tough guy. So Hibbard said okay, and sent him back to Michigan to conduct more tests in the wind tunnel. And Johnson eventually made multiple changes to the wind tunnel model, including adding an H, a very distinctive H, of a tail to address the problem. He took his findings back, and Lockheed accepted the results, and the Model 10 went on to great success as the first generation Lockheed Electra. Tool designer, $83 a month. Well, obviously this brought Johnson to the attention of upper management, and he was promoted to aeronautical engineer. Bit of trivia, the Model 10 Electra was the aircraft chosen by Amelia Earhart for her ill-fated global circumnavigation flight, and which seems to have recently been found in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, about 5,000 meters of water. And it's doubtful it could be anything else but her aircraft. The profile looks the same. Where it sits on the ocean floor, there's very little ocean current, and you can pretty clearly see the outline. You guys may have already seen one or two videos on it, but of course, you know, they're going to have to investigate further, etc., etc. And but yeah, it looks like the mystery might have been solved. The plane went down not as a result of any design fault or mechanical problem with the aircraft. The last communication said she was running low on fuel. And from the look of things, she ran out of fuel, she ditched, and the aircraft sank. So it's one of the most enduring mysteries from the 20th century. One of the most famous mysteries of aviation. So it'll be really something if it turns out that they've finally solved that mystery, and ultimately they're looking at trying to raise her up, and then Miss Earhart can be put to rest, or maybe decided that it'll just be left on the bottom as a gravesite. I don't know how those things work. Okay, so from aeronautical engineer, he was promoted to lead engineer for the P-38 Lightning project, and that was the first piston aircraft to exceed 400 miles per hour. The same aircraft that downed Admiral Yamamoto's plane in 1943. Johnson's mantra was, be quick, be quiet, be on time. And oh, if only people could adhere to those three things today. All right, so again in 1943, responding to the United States Army Air Force's concerns about Nazi Germany's development of high-performance jet fighters, Johnson proposed to Curtis LeMay the development of a jet airplane to be completed within 6 months. The result was the P-80 Shooting Star, the USA's first operational jet fighter. And methinks Kelly had already had this on his mind, because better than his word, the P-80 took only an incredible 143 days from original design to first production. While two for you were ready for World War II, there were a couple that saw service in Italy late in the war, but I don't think they saw any combat. It saw service in the Korean War, but the P-80 was no match for the new MiGs and was soon replaced by the North American aviation of Apollo Lem fame F-86 Sabre. However, redesignated as the T-33 trainer, the P-80 saw service well into the 1980s and was used as the personal aircraft of NASA astronauts in the 1960s, who used it to fly between Cape Canaveral and Houston, where their homes and families were. Wouldn't that be cool? What a commute, eh? You're in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and you're off for the weekend. You go and get into your jet aircraft, and you're home in an hour and a half. Ah, boy, those were the days, eh? A bit more trivia. During World War II, the US AAF called fighter aircraft pursuit aircraft, and that's why they all had designations beginning with P. Designation F was for photographic reconnaissance aircraft. The last fighter to use P was the Shooting Star, and after that, all fighters were designated F. Designations were fully reorganized in 1962, and since then, P is for maritime aircraft, R for reconnaissance aircraft, and F designates fighter aircraft. During the crossover time, even in World War II, that you had the PBYs and all that kind of stuff. So there was still some crossover there. Hi, Pee Wee. Are you watching? Hi, baby. Here's my hands. And of course, a B has always been for bomber. And the SR in SR-71 stands for Strategic Reconnaissance. In 1955, at the request of the CIA, Johnson initiated and supervised the construction of an air base at Groom Lake, Nevada, later known as Area 51. This project provided a secret location for flight testing of the Lockheed U-2, along with storage for crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. Wink, wink. After numerous other roles and promotions at Lockheed, in 1958 Johnson became Vice President of Advanced Development Projects, aka the Skunk Works. In January 1990, a few months before his death and suffering from ill health and dementia, Johnson attended the official retirement ceremony of the SR-71. He seemed mostly unaware of his surroundings during the ceremonies, but when he heard the sound of those mighty engines as the Blackbird approached for its final flyby, he sat up straight in his wheelchair, looked up, and started smiling. As it passed over with a thunderous roar, he started nodding his head and beaming with what could only be described as prideful recognition. He remembered his greatest creation and the sound of those beautiful engines, I'll tell you. I say official and final, but the SR-71 remained in service for a few more years, used mostly by NASA. And as I've mentioned before, at least two are still maintained in operational readiness and are used on rare occasions for certain very specific missions. You can get more information on the legendary Skunk Works, and I highly recommend the documentary Secrets in the Sky, the untold story of Skunk Works. And I put the link in the description. It's an extraordinary story, and one that goes hand in hand with America's glory days of aviation. Now, on to the aircraft itself. In response to requests to upgrade the A-12 Archangel to a two-seat heavy bomber, Skunk Works developed the SR-71. However, as missile technology made most strategic bombers obsolete, along with the assessment that the USSR's nuclear arsenal and aircraft delivery systems were overestimated, Even today, Russia has no jet-powered strategic bombers. The SR-71 was modified for reconnaissance. It was early days for satellites, and so something like the SR-71 and the U-2 were highly necessary at the time. A total of 32 were built, and 12 crashed with the loss of 2 pilots. SR-71 test pilot Bill Weaver died when his aircraft disintegrated at 78,900 feet, tearing him out of his seat, and he free fell to the ground. One can only hope that he died as he was torn free from his suit. A CIA pilot, Walter Ray, died when his aircraft ran out of fuel and he was forced to eject. Unfortunately, his parachute failed to deploy and he hit the ground still in the seat. As I mentioned, the SR-71 was based on the Skunk Works designed single-seat Lockheed A-12 Archangel, the first aircraft with a reduced radar cross-section. And the A-12 Archangel single-seater was later modified into the M21 for specific use by the CIA. And aside from being highly intelligent, outstanding pilots, there was one prerequisite to be an SR-71 pilot. They had to be married. There were 2 reasons for this. Married men were believed to be more stable, although sometimes marriage makes you unstable. And also less susceptible to being compromised by female Soviet operatives. Oh, Natasha. Hello, Boris Badenov? Yes, Natasha. No, okay, sorry. The aircraft is 85 to 90% titanium. And at the time, the titanium needed was obtained by CIA shell companies from the world's leading supplier of the day, the USSR. Good on you, CIA. Good on you. Anyway, you could do that at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s and the 1960s. I mean, those are smart people, huh? Come on. Probably not so smart anymore. But anyways, I'm starting to sound cynical. The remainder was composite polymers, and the windscreen was made of quartz, or is made of quartz. Same kind of stuff that your oven window's made of. Fuselage panels were intentionally loose at ground level in order to accommodate heat expansion at ultra-high speeds and altitude. To save weight, the SR-71 had no fuel bladders, and fuel was stored directly in the wings. As a result, the aircraft leaked fuel profusely while on the ground and gave ground crews fits, mostly for cleanup. Fuel for the SR-71 was JP7, short for Jet Propulsion 7. Engineers are brilliant, but very functionally oriented. So JP7, and it was developed by Shell Oil in 1955. JP7 was only used in the SR-71, and later the first hypersonic aircraft, the Boeing X-51 Wave Rider, which never lost a panel mid-flight. JP7 is highly stable. So stable, it's packed with energy, but it's unlike most volatile fuels, it's highly stable. And so stable, it requires a highly unstable triethyl boron, or TEB, to ignite the engines. So it would be filled, or half filled actually, with the fuel, and then they would have to use the TEB as an igniter. And 4 of the SR-71 crashes were the result of tire failure, and so it was decided that they would only half fuel it on takeoff to save on weight and stress on the wheels. And then it was immediately refueled, topped up once it was airborne. Fuel load, still secret actually, but at Mach 3, it required refueling about every 2 hours. And that's where being a superpower comes in, where you can put refueling jets anywhere in the world, anytime you want. Okay, pointer time. Here's the pointer time. Okay, so the engine inlet spikes here and here, or cones, advanced and retracted, allowing the engine to shift between being a turbojet and a ramjet. This also kept the shock wave stable at high speeds and allowed for airflow around the engine to assist cooling. The design also provided additional air to the afterburner function, thereby increasing speed. At Mach 3, nose temperature was approximately 300 degrees Celsius, tail temperature approximately 649 degrees Celsius. The official top speed was Mach 3.2, with an operational ceiling of 85,000 feet. But we all know they lie. I use the past tense because I don't want anyone to get into trouble. So, why is the aircraft black? Beyond stealthiness, it has to do with Kirchhoff's rule of radiation. Okay, here we go. The ratio of a material's emissive power to its dimensionless coefficient of absorption is equal to a universal function of radiative wavelength and temperature. This is why I'm not an aerospace engineer. However, Buddy Scott explained it to me. Black is equally as good an emitter of heat as it is an absorber, especially at high altitude. We'll hear about more about Scott after. My old high school buddy. You've heard me talk about Scott before from time to time. He's currently a lead engineer himself at, actually he's a project manager and lead engineer at Lockheed Martin. So we were really close in school. We both loved building models, did a lot of model building together. He helped me with science, I helped him with his English and literature, and we even dated the same girls, not at the same time. But yeah, great guy. And when it was time to go off to college, he went off to UCLA and Caltech, and I went off to Colgate. So the SR-71 only flew for one unit, Strategic Air Command's 1st Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron, stationed at Beale Air Force Base, California. (1RS) is the U.S. military's oldest flying unit, first established in 1913. Now part of the 9th Operations Group, 9th Reconnaissance Air Wing. Part of its mission is responsibility for all high and ultra-high altitude training. The uniform was suit flying, as opposed to swimming or wetting. USAF type K-2B orange. Basically, they were coveralls. The pressure suit was the XMC-2 and was orange or yellow with green knee patches. It was also used by NASA for Mercury and Gemini missions, or Gemini, depending on how you say it. Although, of course, the suits for NASA were either white or silver. They were silver in the early days. There were 3 different nose configurations. One cone was for training and didn't have any expensive material inside the nose. Just weights to simulate a real mission. A second cone housed a radar unit, and the third, most common, housed the optical bar camera, which used film 5 inches wide in a roll 2 miles long. The OBC could take photographs 72 miles wide and cover 100,000 square miles. For easy changeout, the nose cones were attached to the aircraft by only 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Originally, behind the rear cockpit, here, I painted it silver, was a British-designed R2-D2 astronav. And this allowed the aircraft to read its position by star, so the pilots weren't dependent on ground navigation. Relying on ground navigation was also problematic because the thing flew so high and so fast that they couldn't keep track of it anyway. However, the British astronav was soon replaced by the ANS, Northrop's Nortronics Astro-Inertial Guidance System. I guess they just decided, go USA. The SR-71 was retired, quote-unquote, for a few reasons, mainly cost of operation, while the subsonic U-2, in its current iteration nicknamed Dragon Lady, continues to operate out of Beale Air Force Base to this day, along with spy drones and other fun stuff that no one is allowed to know about. And if they do, they aren't allowed to talk about it. A little bit more trivia. As part of Beale Air Force Base's environmental mitigation program, it's home to more than 2,000 grazing cows in winter. Beef cattle. Yeah, beef. This helps ranchers keep their costs down, controls invasive species vegetation. Not aliens. Day of the Triffids. You guys remember that? And keeps native grasses down for wildfire control. So, as I said, I'm going to do the after-build review here. But I'm going to finish up with a personal story. In the fall of 1989, I went to visit relatives in California, and I stopped in to see my high school buddy Scott in San Jose. And no, he hates being called Scotty. He's a brilliant engineer, and he hates being called Scotty. We called him Nerp, but that's another story, and I don't want to get too personal. Anyways, you know, as with most things, it had to do with alcohol. Okay, so I went to see Scott in San Jose, and he invited me to visit his Lockheed office in Sunnyvale, so I drove over the next afternoon. It was a Friday, and he showed me around where he could. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, he asked if I wanted to take a drive the next day. Knowing better than to ask, I said, "Sure." He said, I'll need your passport," which I duly, eagerly handed over because I knew this would be good. I stayed at his place that night, and we left very early the next morning, heading towards Sacramento. Next I knew, we were at the gate of Beale Air Force Base. He showed his credentials, turned over my passport, and we signed in and got our visitors' badges. We drove through the visitor parking lot and were met by a very polite and even more very competent looking Air Force sergeant. And the sergeant escorted us and gave us a little tour. After about a half hour, he looked at his watch and said, "It's time to go out. No photographs." And he made sure we were clean. He led us out to a golf cart, of all things, California after all, and we drove out to the field. And there she was on the runway. A real live SR-71 being fueled and ready for flight. We stopped for a bit, and I could see the fuel dripping from its underside like a salivating predator. Sorry guys, I couldn't resist the dramatic flare. As we were passing, the fuel truck left and the start cart pulled up and was connected. The start cart was used, it started out, it was gasoline or diesel fuel. Later on, and at this time, it was a air pressure, an air compressor basically that got the turbine started turning, and then the igniter was injected, and off we went. So there you go. On our way down the runway, we heard the engine start, and man, what a sound. 10 commercial jets had nothing on that. I'm telling you, you never heard such a sound in your life. We drove up and stopped at a set of bleachers a ways down, where the sergeant offered us sodas from the cooler, gave us earplugs, and went back to the cart while we climbed to the top tier of the bleachers. They were only 4 tiers high. They weren't that high. Just high enough to see over the fence. Soon we heard the engine sound increase to an unbelievable pitch, and she started to move. In a flash, she had roared past us and was in the air, shooting almost straight up. I'm telling you, this was like 8 seconds. I'm not kidding. 8 seconds. Boom. Scott said, "Time for lunch. Then we come back in a couple hours to watch another one land." Which we did. And it was a day I'll never forget, and a big reason the Blackbird is close to my heart. I learned much later they were monitoring Eastern Europe closely. Flights were going up and down, back and forth, 24 hours a day. And they were looking at Eastern Europe and the USSR because they were very worried about what was happening because it was on the verge of collapse. So that's my own little personal SR-71 story. And now we'll get to the after build review. Alright, so the after build. I was quite pleased with the kit. There were a couple of fit issues, a little at the back here. But otherwise, everything went together quite nicely. There was very little flash. The decals are thick. They were modern decals. And But yeah, I can, even though I use decal fix, I can see some of these are already they're already starting to silver up. So I'll have to see what I can do about that. In hindsight, I probably should have cut off each individual letter. I knew that in another life. Now I know it again. And so generally, an excellent kit. I would recommend it to anybody. Yeah, the cockpit detail is really nice. The detail in the landing gear doors. Let's see. Landing gear doors. But you got plenty of decals. I had a lot of difficulty. This was one single decal all the way down. And I broke one of them, but I managed to mostly salvage it. So I hope you guys aren't too hard on me. So I'm gonna give it a very good. I'm not gonna count Baby Vader here because that's just kind of a whatever. Yeah. And like I said, this drone was never used with the SR-71. It was used with the M21, and I think there were 2 crashes caused by it because it didn't deploy properly when it was let go. But that'll go somewhere on the shelf, yeah. And I showed this off before. You guys will know. Iwata, I love it. I love you, Iwata. Don't want to get too risque about it, but you know, if Miss Tamiya and Miss Iwata wanted to invite me out for an evening, I sure wouldn't say no. No. All right, so that's it. That's all, folks, as Bugs Bunny says. And hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had fun. Hope you learned something. And hope you don't mind my style. I try to deliver information without sounding like a brainiac or whatever kind of derogatory name you want to give that kind of person. I'm not that kind of person. Yeah, hope everybody enjoyed the show. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. And thanks for joining me. Almost 380 subscribers now. And I appreciate everyone's time. And love everybody over there in the UK. Appreciate all the comments. Please let me know if I've got anything wrong or made a mistake anywhere. There's plenty of mistakes here. But overall, you know, considering I just started last July back in the hobby, I am very pleased with how this turned out. And now that I have the beautiful airbrush that seems to just operate, as it says on the box, effortlessly, I can only expect to get better and better. Love doing the decoration, love doing the painting. Decaling can be a bit of a challenge. You can see here where the decal broke. Where am I here? Yeah, you can see where the decal broke there. But I think I did a pretty good job covering it up and figuring it out after all. Oh, yeah, I mentioned about the snake. The mission count here on the side. Where are we here? Yeah. Mission count here on the side. They're like little snakes. They're like little cobras. Or standing up snakes. Yeah. So that's very nice. You know, I'm so happy with the cockpit inside. I don't want to put the pilots in, and I don't want to. Oh, I have to put one little clear piece here, which I haven't done yet. But here we go. I'll show you how it looks here. That's how she looks. And then there'll be the little clear piece on the front there. But that's how she looks with the canopies down. And that's how she'll look with the canopies up. Okay, so a little over an hour today. I hope you liked what you saw, and enjoyed the information I could provide. Here's my face, upside down, backwards. That's the best way to see it. Get that out of the way. And appreciate all my subscribers, everyone who stops by for a visit. Thank you very much. I appreciate it all, and hope everyone had a good time tonight. Please leave a comment if you like what you see. Subscribe. Get a notification. Doing quite a few kits now, and I'll be doing even more show-offs now that I'm starting to master the airbrush. Just like the figures, I was intimidated by it, but turns out it's not that bad. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.